What's up, Kings? It's Dan from Daft Previews, and I am back. I've got another 6 NBA player picks for you. This is going to be the most comprehensive player prop preview that you are going to watch before this next slate of games. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently on this one. I've done my research as I normally would, but normally I don't share everything I find. I kind of just share what I end up landing on. But today, I'm going to share with you some previews on a lot of players that are playing on this massive slate of games. We're going to be going through all the players who have great matchups, and we're going to preview all the players who are hot right now, all the players who have great form over their last 10 games, and then I'll get to my picks. If you do want to jump straight to my picks, feel free to click ahead. I've got chapters there. Jump ahead for it. Let's get straight into it. So the first one in terms of easy matchups, I've done this base over the last 15 games. So check this out. Our very first one, it's a lean right now. It's Donovan Mitchell, over 27.5 points. Now he's versing the San Antonio Spurs, and over their last 15 games, the Spurs have allowed the most points to point guards. Mitchell, he's also covered this line in his last 2 games against the San Antonio Spurs. Our next one is Max Strus, over 4.5 rebounds in the same game. Over the last 15, the Spurs allow the most rebounds to shooting guards. Now, Max has only covered this line in 4 of his last 10 games, and he also went under in his last 2 games against the Spurs. Our next one is Dean Wade, over 10.5 points, rebounds, and assists. And that's because the Spurs, they allow the 7th most points, 5th most rebounds, and the 3rd most assists to power forwards. Now, Wade has covered this line in 7 of his last 10. He is averaging 14 points, rebounds, and assists in that span. And the last one in that game is Jared Allen, over 16.5 points. The Spurs, they allow the 4th most points to centers this year. Over the last 15 games. Now, Jared Allen, he's covered this line in 6 of his last 10 games. He's averaging 18.4 points per game. He did score 16 and 17 points against him in the 2 matchups last season. There's no Garland or Mobley in the lineup this time around. This could be worth a play. Jared Allen, over 16.5 points. The next one is Anthony Simons, over 21.5 points up against the Brooklyn Nets. Now, the Brooklyn Nets, they allow the 4th most points to point guards over the last 15 games. Simons, he's covered this line in 9 of 13 games this season. He's averaging 24.5 points. He's had 2 games against the Nets, and he scored 24 and 15 points last season. There's no Dame in Portland anymore, so it could be worth taking depending on who lines up for the Trailblazers. Our next one is Mikal Bridges, over 29.5 PRA. The Blazers, they do allow the 4th most points, 6th most rebounds, and the 5th most assists to shooting guards. But Bridges is in terrible form. He's covered in only 2 of his last 10, averaging 25.5 points, rebounds, and assists. His minutes and his shot attempts are there, but his shot percentage is fucking awful. So not sure if you want to play him, but he's got to bounce back eventually. Our next one, it's in the Hawks versus Orlando Magic game. We're taking Sadiq Bey. Well, we're not taking him, but he's got a great matchup in this one. Over 2.5 3-pointers made. Now, the Orlando Magic, they allow the 7th most 3-pointers made to small forwards. Sadiq's only covered in 2 of his last 10, but he does play a lot of good minutes. He's got a lot of good volume. He's attempting 7 3-pointers per game, but his percentages are shit. But still, might be worth taking for 2 if you like adding him to parlays. Our next one's Paolo Banchero, over 34.5 points and assists. Now, the Atlanta Hawks allow the 5th most points and the 4th most assists to power forwards. Banchero's covered this line in 4 of his last 10, averaging 33 points and assists. His recent form, fucking amazing. 48 and 43 points and assists in his last 2. One to look out for, depending on lineups, but I do like Banchero, but it's still a lean at this point. The next one is CJ McCollum against the Sacramento Kings, over 3.5 rebounds. The Sacramento Kings allow the 9th most rebounds to point guards this season. Now, CJ's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 4.1 rebounds per game. He did cover in 2 of his last 4 against the Kings, but he does average 3.3 rebounds per game in those matchups. In the same game, Brandon Ingram, over 23.5 points. The Kings allow the 7th most points to shooting guards. He's covered in 5 of his last 10, averaging 21.5 points per game. Shot attempts have been down in his last 3 games, though. So Ingram is covered in 3 of his last 5 against the Kings, averaging 26 points per game in those matchups. In the same game, I like Harrison Barnes, over 1.5 3-pointers made based on his matchup. The Pelicans do allow the 6th most 3-pointers made to small forwards in the last 15 games. Barnes, he's covered in 6 of his last 10. He's averaging 2 3-pointers made per game. His last 2 games have been excellent. He had 4 and 5 3-pointers made in his last 2. In that same game, Keegan Murray over 5.5 rebounds. The Pelicans, they allow the third most rebounds to power forwards. But Murray, he's only covered in 3 of his last 10, averaging 5.7 rebounds per game. If you do like recent form, he's killed it in his last two. Last two games, he's had 12 rebounds in both of them. So one to watch, also depending if Zion's playing or not. So the next one, Anthony Edwards up against the Dallas Mavericks. Over 41.5 points, rebounds, and assists. So Dallas allowed the sixth most points, second most rebounds, and the sixth most assists to shooting guards. Ants covered this line in 4 of his last 10 games, averaging 41.5 points, rebounds, and assists. We also like Karl Anthony Towns based on his matchup, over 34.5 PRA. Dallas allows the second most points, sixth most rebounds, and the fifth most assists to power forwards. Karl Anthony Towns has covered this in 4 of his last 10, averaging 32 points, rebounds, and assists. And the last one in that same game is Rudy Gobert, over 13.5 points. So Dallas, they allow the third most points to centers. Rudy's only covered this line in 3 of his last 10, though, averaging 12.5 points per game. He does have excellent form against the Mavs. He's covered in 3 of his last 4, averaging 17 points against them. On to the Denver versus Detroit Pistons game. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope over 9.5 points. I know we've said that name more recently. God damn it. But Detroit, they allow the 6th most points to shooting guards. KCP's covered this line against him in 3 straight games. He scored 10 and then 2 games with 20 points. His form is down of late, though. He's only covered in 3 of his last 10, and he's gone under in 4 consecutive games. Michael Porter Jr., over 24.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Good matchup for him. Detroit allow the 7th most points, 5th most rebounds, and the 7th most assists to small forwards. His recent form is inconsistent, though. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. He's covered in 2 of his last 3 against the Detroit Pistons, averaging 25.3 points, rebounds, and assists. And Aaron Gordon, over 15.5 points. So Detroit allow the 3rd most points to power forwards. He's covered this line well. 6 of his last 10. He's averaging 16.6 points per game. He was on fire the other night. 30 points, I think he scored. So in his return from his dog mauling attack. So Aaron Gordon could be one for you guys to watch. And then we've got the Raptors versus the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry, over 5.5 assists. So the Raptors, they allow the most assists to point guards. And Curry's hit this line in 6 out of his last 10 games. They also played the Raptors earlier this year. Steph Curry recorded 11 assists in that game. In the same games, Emmanuel Quickley, over 19.5 points. The Warriors allow the 3rd most points to shooting guards. Quickley's covered this in 2 of his 3 games as a Raptor. He's averaging 20 points per game in a Toronto Raptors uniform. He did score 22 points against the Warriors in his last matchup, but that was over a year ago. Klay Thompson, over 20.5 points and assists. The Raptors allow the 6th most points and the 2nd most assists to shooting guards. Clay's over this line in 6 of his last 10, averaging 20.5 points and assists per game. And then the very last game of the day, it's the Clippers versus the Lakers. James Harden over 4.5 rebounds. So the Lakers allow the 2nd most rebounds to point guards. Harden's covered in 4 of his last 10, averaging 4.7 rebounds per game. He pulled down 4 and 7 rebounds in his last 2 matchups against the Lakers. The next one's Paul George, over 3.5 assists. So the Lakers are allowing the 3rd most assists to small forwards over the last 15. PG is covered in 3 of his last 4 games against the Lakers. He's covered in only 4 of his last 10, though, averaging 3.1 assists per game. There's also Kawhi Leonard, over 3.5 assists. So the Lakers allow the 3rd most assists to power forwards. Now, Leonard's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 3.5 assists. He's covered in his last 2 games against the Lakers with 4 and 5 assists. Staying in the assist market for the rest of these, LeBron James, over 8.5 assists. So the Clippers allow the 4th most assists to power forwards. LeBron's gone under this line in 4 consecutive games against the Clippers, though, but he has covered in 5 of his last 10, averaging 9 assists per game. And then the last one in terms of matchups is Anthony Davis, over 3.5 assists. So the Clippers allow the 4th most assists to centers. AD's gone under this line in 4 consecutive games against the Clippers, though. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, averaging 4.3 assists per game. So those are all the players who have good matchups in this upcoming slate, and those are some of the statistics you should really keep in mind if you want to pick them. I'm personally just leaning those at the moment. Probably not going to play most of them, if I'm being honest, because there are other things that you need to take into consideration, like the recent form of players. So these players that I'm about to mention are probably the hottest players out there at the moment. So let me explain. The very first one is Luka Doncic, over 33.5 points. Now, he's covered this line in 8 out of his last 10 games. He's averaging 37.2 points per game. He's covered in one of his last 4 games against the Wolves, though, but that happened to be the game earlier this season where he finished with 39 points. So if you like recent form, Luka Doncic is absolutely hot. You could back him to tear apart the Timberwolves once again. Another player is Kawhi Leonard. So Kawhi Leonard over 26.5 points. He's covered in 8 of his last 10 games. He's averaging 30 points per game. His shooting percentages from all over the park are out of this world. Similar to Luka, he's covered in only 1 of his last 4 against the opposition, which is the Lakers. But he did score 38 points against them earlier this season. The next one's Norman Powell for the Clippers, over 12.5 points. So he's covered in 8 of his last 10, averaging 14.7 points per game. He has covered in 3 of 5 games against the Lakers, averaging 17.6 points per game against them. The next one is Trae Young, over 2.5 rebounds. So Trae, he's covered 2.5 rebounds in 8 of his last 10 games, averaging 3.4 rebounds. In his last 5 games against the Magic, he's covered this in 4 occasions, and he's averaging 3.2 rebounds per game. The Magic also shoot the 5th worst three-point percentage this season. They attempt approximately 30 of them per game. Long shots have long rebounds, so guards have better opportunities to get some boards against the Orlando Magic. And the last one is RJ Barrett. So over 4.5 rebounds. I say that with a sigh because he killed us not too long ago, but he has covered this line in 8 of his last 10, averaging 5.8 rebounds per game. He has gone under in both games against the Warriors, though. He did screw us against the Kings, so I won't be touching him on this one. But, 4 rebounds might be a play for parlays and multis. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that little bit of research. I do type this shit up every single time I do my picks anyway. I just never share that. So if you did, let me know in the comment section. It might be something that I can add to future videos. If not, we'll just go back to doing what was working for us last time. But let's get straight into the picks, shall we? Won't be doing comment of the day because this video is long enough. But I promise you, I read those comments and I thank you. Frustrating time for us, but I reckon we get back on the green side of things here. Our first pick is Cade Cunningham. I like his over 24.5 points in this one. Now, he's covered in 17 of 35 games this year. He's averaging 23 points per game. The line is set at 24.5, so it's 1.5 points above his average, and he's up against the reigning champs. So why would we take it? Well, he's covered in 8 of his last 10 games, averaging 28.7 points per game. I love the volume that we're seeing out of Cade. He's attempting 20.5 shot attempts per game over this last 10. He scored 27 points against the Denver Nuggets earlier this season, and he did that on shooting only 17 times. He was very aggressive and he got to the line because he does have that size advantage against the backcourt of the Denver Nuggets. I think a blowout is the main risk in this play. He's played 2 other top defensive teams on the road over the past week. So he scored 31 points against the Celtics. I think they're the 3rd best defensive team in the comp. But he only managed 6 points against the Houston Rockets the very following game, who were very much in line with the Boston Celtics. Denver's not as good as either of those teams, but they're not far behind either and still one of the better defensive teams in the league. But look, I'm willing to take my chances here with Cade. He's going to have that size advantage, whether it's Murray or KCP. My man should be able to get to the line at will and get 20 shots off at least, provided the game's close. So let's go Cade. Our very next one, we're actually staying in the same game. I like Jamal Murray over 6.5 assists. Now, Jamal's covered this line in only 8 of 23 games this season. He's averaging 6.3 per game. He does have a great matchup today against the Detroit Pistons, who allow the 4th most assists to point guards. His record over his last 5 games is excellent. He's covered in 4 out of those games, averaging 8.5 assists. What's important to note is that all of the games where he's covered this line lately have been home games for the Denver Nuggets. Well, we've got another home game here for Murray, so praying that the trend continues. In terms of his matchup, Murray's covered this line well against the Detroit Pistons. In his last 2 games, he's recorded 8 and 10 assists. Now, this line may move. I wouldn't take it at 7.5, but if you can still find it at 6.5, let's go. Our very next play might be my favorite one of the day. I don't usually rank plays, but I got pretty aroused when I was writing this one up. So it's Malik Monk, over 4.5 assists. I love watching this guy play. He's a spark plug off the bench, can handle the rock, shoot threes. He can yam it on your head. But look, he's got a great matchup in this game, and his recent form is sure to make your balls tingle. So check this out. The Pelicans allow the most assists to shooting guards over the last 15 games. Recently, we've seen Anthony Edwards, Austin Reeves, Jordan Clarkson, Keontae George, Desmond Bain put on an absolute passing clinic against the Pelicans. Now, they all crushed their assist lines in those games, and I'm liking Malik Monk to do the same. But here's the ball tingling moment for you. On top of having the best matchup he possibly could for assists, Monk also has excellent form in his last 10, covering 8 games, averaging 6.1 assists per game. On top of that horny recent form, he's also covered in 3 consecutive games against the Pelicans, recording 5 assists in all 3 games that he played against them this season. So this may be one of those bets where it's too good to be true with all the stars aligning. But look, I can't not take this bet. So let's go Malik Monk. My next pick is Russell Westbrook over 4.5 rebounds. Man, I miss those days when you could just see Westbrook on the slate and you knew you can make a play on one of his props because he's going to be everywhere. He's going to be doing everything and he's going to be on the court for 40 minutes. But those days are long and gone now. Things have changed and he's a bona fide 6th man. But look, despite the reduction in his role, he's covered this line in 8 of his last 10 games, averaging 6.5 rebounds per game. He's played the Lakers twice since he's been traded. He recorded 3 rebounds in 21 minutes and then 11 rebounds in 40 minutes. So at the moment, he's averaging 21 minutes per game over his last 10 games, coming off the bench. The Lakers, like I said earlier, they allow the second most rebounds to point guards. So this feels like a good play to me. The Clippers, they've been playing very well. They've now integrated Harden seamlessly in the lineup. I expect Russell to play his role in this one in limited action, 20 to 25 minutes. So that's for him to compete hard, play defense, and grab some rebounds. Let's go, Russ. And then my next pick is Trae Young. I like his over 39.5 points, rebounds, and assists. Now, Trae's covered in 17 of 32 games this season, averaging 41.8 points, rebounds, and assists per game. His form over his last 5 has taken a dip. He's only covered in 1 of those games, averaging 37 points, rebounds, and assists. Now, the Hawks were just backshotted and blown out by the Pacers, and Trae only had 21 PRA, shooting 4 from 18 from the field. I do like this game as a bounce-back spot for him because he's up against a team that he's feasted on in the past. In his last 5 games against the Orlando Magic, he's covered this line in 4 of them, averaging 46 PRAs in those games. They did meet earlier this year. Trae gave him a stat line of 41 points, 4 rebounds, and 88 assists, a horny 53 PRAs. The Atlanta Hawks are 2.5-point favorites in this one. So everyone's suggesting this game's going to be close. If it is close, Trae's going to play 36 plus minutes in this game. The last stat I have to share with you on this one is that when Trae plays 36 plus minutes, he's hit this line in 15 of 21 games this season, averaging 48 points, rebounds, and assists in those games. So let's go, Trae. Let's keep this game close. Let's keep it competitive. Let's rack up them stats, my boy. And then my last pick of the day, it's a bit of a simple one, but it's a plus money play, so I could not include this one. We're taking Jeremy Grant over 2.5 assists. Now, he's not a known passer, but believe it or not, he's covered this line in 17 of 30 games this season, averaging 2.6 assists per game. He has covered in 8 of his last 10 games, averaging 3.6 assists per game. And given you can get this at plus money, I had to look further into it. Now, looking at his potential assists, he's averaging 5.2 in the season and then 2.6 assists. Over this 10-game stretch where he's been a lot better, he's averaging 5.5 potential assists and 3.6 actual assists. So what tells me is his teammates are just making shots of his passes as of late, and we only need 3 of them in this one. Grant, he's got excellent form against the Nets. He's recorded 3 and 5 assists in those last 2 matchups, although he did play 37 and 40 minutes in those games. The blowout is the biggest risk in this game. The Portland Trailblazers are absolutely shit, and they get blown out quite often. They're on the road in Brooklyn as 8-point underdogs, and they don't have DeAndre Ayton. I do still think it's worth a play, as Grant has hit this line in 3 of his last 3 games where he played less than 25 minutes. He was still able to cover this assist line. But hopefully the Blazers keep this competitive. If Grant gets 30 plus minutes, this should cash with ease. But look, that's the last pick that I've got for you. Quite a comprehensive video, close to 20 minutes. But, I do all this research anyway, so I thought let's try to see how this lands if I share it all with you. Let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you want to see those stats? Do you want to see who's got easy matchups? Do you want to see who's got hot form, or can you find that yourself? And do you just want me to put the picks out? You let me know, and I shall deliver. But look, if you are riding with me, let's cross our fingers, cross our toes, and let's see how she goes. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.